Since the dawn of badminton, there have been discussions and revisions to the scoring system, something which in the last 20 years or so has been somewhat of a common theme. Changing the scoring system, though, isn't something that's only privy to the individual competitions, as in the early 1980s both the Thomas and Uber Cups also received a revised format, changing from a best-of-9 match series to a best-of-5 match series. It must be said though, that change a little over 40 years ago is the only revision in the history of badminton made to the team competitions. The Sudirman Cup has used the same format since its inception in 1989, and the World Junior Team Championships, the Suhandinata Cup, has followed the same format as well since its own inception in 2000. That is, however, until this year. As for the 2024 edition of the Suhandinata Cup, the BWF opted for a completely new system, the relay system. This new system was, in BWF's own words, supposed to be revolutionary change and offer greater opportunities for upcoming badminton nations to challenge traditional powerhouses. Now that the 2024 edition is completed, with Indonesia defeating China in the final, so much for upcoming nations challenging traditional powerhouses, eh? It's time to look into this new system to see whether it's revolutionary or not, and to also kind of decide whether or not it should be implemented into further badminton competitions in the future. When this system was announced, there was two initial responses: scepticism and confusion. I'll look at the scepticism later, but I want to start by trying to ease some of that confusion. To do this, rather than try and simplify it myself, I put in what BWF wrote into ChatGPT, asking it to simplify it, and here is what it gave me. The first match is played to 11 points, change ends at 6. The second match starts from the first match's score. The losing player/pair starts with at least 5 points or their actual score, whichever is higher. Each following match continues from the previous score, with the trailing player/pair starting with either their actual score or a multiple of 5. 5 for match 2, 10 for match 3, 15 for match 4, etc., whichever is higher. Matches continue in sets of 11 points. For example, the second match ends at 22 points, the third at 33 points, and so on until the 10th match, which ends at 110 points, which changes ends at 105. No player can play in more than 4 matches. The first 5 matches must include all 5 disciplines: men's singles, women's singles, men's doubles, women's doubles, and mixed doubles. The winner of the pre-tie draw chooses the first and third matches, and the opposing team chooses the second and fourth matches. The remaining matches played 5th. The last 5 matches, 6 to 10, follow the same order as the first 5. If a player competes in 2 consecutive matches, no additional rest is allowed. Now, it must be said that's still rather difficult to follow, but I do hope that it eases some of the confusion you may have. Now, if any of you have watched some of these matches, then you can attest to the fact that it is a little easier to follow when you're actually watching it, rather than reading the rules from a screen. But anyway, I feel that is as best as I can explain it, and trying to get rid of that confusion element that a lot of people felt. So now it's time to move on to the next one. Scepticism. Like I said, there was a lot of scepticism around this new scoring system. A lot of questions attached. How would it work? Would it be exciting? Would it make matches more intense? Would it take away too much of the essence of what badminton is as a sport? Isn't it a little gimmicky? Okay, that last one may be just me. But maybe the biggest question was the simplest. Why? I had all of these questions and more swirling around in my mind before the competition began, but just like many others, I was willing to give it a go. I needed to see it in action before I could lay any criticisms or critiques against it. So I did just that. I watched as many of the matches as I could, and I do have my own thoughts, but I'll get to those at the end of this video, as I feel it's best before I do that to lay out the pros and cons of this new relay system. The first pro for this relay system is that matches really do end quicker. Now already, some of you might already be saying that that isn't necessarily a pro, but I do think that it is more of a pro in the context of these World Junior Team Championships. There are a lot of nations competing, and not only does it have group stages, but then it has knockout rounds for every single position. That is a lot of matches to get through, so having a scoring system that allows matches to be completed within 2 hours, often less in early rounds, is certainly a plus. Another reason why this is a pro is that it does make a match more consumable for more people. Even a closely contested match under this new relay system is usually only about 2 hours long, whereas the equivalent in the old format can almost last 3 times as long. Again, this is another contestable point, but bear in mind I will come back to these later. Because each individual match is short, it means you get to see new matches quicker and faster, something which could be argued adds more excitement to an overall match. This is certainly a pro if you're someone who likes variety, but it could also be a pro for someone who is new to the sport. It could almost act like a taster menu at a restaurant. Because the point score never resets, it means that every point is crucial. Every point counts. Even if a player or pair is struggling in their own match, if they can even score one more point, it could prove decisive further down the line. On the flip side, this also means that any silly error, like a service fault or mistake, can also prove incredibly costly. I certainly saw this in the final when the Chinese were looking to be coming back at times, only to hit a service error, and that service error felt so much weightier than maybe it would have done in a normal match. So the fact that you never know whether that simple error or fantastic winner or just that additional point earned might influence the end result of the overall match, it does add that extra level of tension and therefore excitement to the overall tie. The biggest pro to this system, in my eyes anyway, is that it is truly a team event. To win, the whole team is involved and every player must play their part. In the old format, matches can be won without the need for the whole team to participate. A nation could win the World Junior Team Championships without the need for strong players in 2 of the 5 disciplines. In fact, as in the knockout stages you stop the match once a team reaches 3 total ties, then it's plausible that 2 of the 5 disciplines will never get played. So this new relay system does mean that everyone has to play, and everyone has to contribute to the team. It doesn't completely eradicate the fact that teams still could win with weak or weaker disciplines, but it does make it harder to play around that. One final pro to this system is not one linked to badminton as a whole, but more to the World Juniors specifically. And that is that this system will allow players to accumulate less fatigue, which is important as the following week they have the individual competition. This was a point someone sent to me on Instagram, and I hadn't thought of it, yet it made perfect sense. 2 weeks of back-to-back competitions is a lot, especially when it's at the highest level of competition. So by having a team event that is a little less heavy on the players is a good way to mitigate fatigue and potential injury. I believe this was one of the reasons why the Sudirman Cup and the World Championships were split in the early 2000s, as before then they used to be played back to back. If this was a reason as to why the BRF decided to implement this relay system, then thumbs up to them for that. Okay, so for me, those are the main pros for this new relay system. It is faster, keeps things fresh with the constant player changes, every rally counts, it mitigates fatigue and potential injury to the players, and it feels more like a team event as every player needs to contribute. All sounds really good, but what are the cons? Well, for me, this list might be a little longer, and it will also include some counters to some of the pros I've just listed. I know ChatGPT's explanation at the start made it a little simpler, but all in all this system is a bit too complicated. I must admit when you watch it being played it isn't too difficult to follow, but still, in comparison to the old format, it is overcomplicated. With the old format, you could explain it to someone that didn't understand badminton incredibly quickly. There are 5 matches played, each match is best of 3 to 21, and each match equals 1 point. So first to 3. Simple, right? This relay system would take a little longer, and with the minimum points part included, gets a little bit convoluted. The 5-point minimum rule for me is completely unnecessary and also potentially very unfair, and let's be honest, it only added more complexity to a system that was already complex enough. I am completely baffled by the need of it, if I'm completely honest with you. Maybe the BWF implemented it to give lesser teams more of a chance, but I felt that it actually could have had disastrous effects. Disastrous effects that maybe did happen and I missed it, so if I did, please do let me know. The reason I say disastrous is that, say in the final, one of the teams had an amazing opening 2 matches, winning 11-1, 11-love. The score should be 22-1, a lead that would almost certainly give them the match. However, under this 5-point minimum, it wouldn't be 22-1, it would be 22-10. In this example, that's 9 free points, something that could be very crucial towards the end of the match. This means, in theory anyway, that a team could win without having to score 110 points. Is it just me, or doesn't that sound rather unfair? If the BWF wish to run this system again in the future, then I hope if one change happens, that they get rid of this 5-point minimum rule. When the best of 5 games to 11 scoring system was put forward, one of the big driving factors behind it was to create more peaks of excitement, or in other words, less dead time. In the best of 3 games to 21, it could be argued that the beginning of each game is just this, dead time, and the matches only get exciting and hit their peak near the end. I would argue against this, especially in the opening stages of the 3rd game in an ND arena, but yeah, it's still a fair point to make. But for me, when I watched the World Junior matches, I did find myself getting disinterested, especially if the gap between teams went above 10 or so. Yes, there were some comebacks, but generally the matches were decided already. This led to a lot of dead time on court, where it almost felt like the players just accepted their fate. I will come back to this in my final section, as maybe there is a way to remedy this. But for me anyway, under this new relay system, whilst a match could become incredibly exciting, it could also become incredibly dull. And it's for that reason that I don't see this new system gaining any advantage over the old one. This is a post by BWF commentator Steen Pedersen to his Twitter account, with his con to this relay system being that games tend to become more tense than well played. And I'd wholeheartedly agree with him, as the matches are so short, there really wasn't any time for players to settle into a match. They can't afford to work out the conditions or figure out their opponent, and this ultimately led to a lot of tense rallies. This was something that was exacerbated when a team found themselves down by a number of points. On the outset, you might think that this new system would invite attacking play, as the matches are short and every point counts. But from what I saw, the opposite became more true, as players would often get caught between trying to play that way to win points, but also scared to lose any points. This was a position so many of the Chinese players found themselves in the final versus Indonesia. In the women's singles, it was crazy to see how different Zhu Wenjing played, as in the first match it started at love all, but by the time she played again, China were down by 7 points. Now, of course, you can't just blame the system for this, nor take away from Mutiara, who definitely played better in that second match. In fact, you can't take anything away from Indonesia as a whole. They were the better team in this situation. But it is an example of exactly what Steen Pedersen was getting at. And this leads me nicely on to my next con. You can call me old school all you like, but one thing I absolutely love about badminton is watching how players deal with different situations, how they're able to work themselves into a match, battle through nerves. And I also just love the ups and downs of a normal match, the ebbs and flows, something that's usually exacerbated at the biggest tournaments, especially team competitions when you're playing for more than just yourself. And for me, this relay system takes all of that and throws it away. The matches are too fast for anyone to truly settle. You can't get away with any errors, and there aren't enough points for ups and downs. Yes, you can get the ups and downs throughout the overall tie, but for me that's different, and not good different. For example, badminton is a sport that can accommodate numerous styles, numerous ways of approaching a match, something which is possible under the old format, something that isn't so possible under this new one. For a more specific example, then some players are generally slower starters, and under this new system there's simply no place for them. So for me, this is the biggest con against this relay system. Like I've already said, one of the big things that I love about watching badminton is watching a player or pair play themselves into a match. Whether they got to overcome nerves, the conditions, the crowds, their opponents, the situation that they find themselves in, that's especially true within team events. All of that is just allowed to play out under the old format, obviously the 3-to-21 system. In this new system, this relay system, it doesn't really happen. You get to obviously see some ups and downs within the match. It does play out like that, although I didn't see too much of that throughout these championships. Generally, if a team had a big lead, they kept it. But you just didn't really get to see the players themselves figure out the conditions, figure out everything that they needed to do, because by the time they had, their match was gone. It was just too short a time for them to really get in, which leads back to what Steve Pedersen said. It doesn't really lend itself to players playing well. It just leads to a lot of tense playing. Yeah, there's some good rallies and there was some exciting moments, but there's just a lot of tension out there. And that kind of leads on to another follow-on point, is that there were a lot of matches that potentially could have been really good that were cut short, just as they were getting to that point where they were going to ramp up. Of course, the flip side, if there's a match that's a bit one-sided, it's done quickly. So I do get that there's the opposite side to that. But for me, the exciting matches, they weren't allowed to play. For me, one example was the final in China-Indonesia. I mean, all 5 matches potentially could have all been really good, but the boys singles, it was world number 2 versus world number 1, and both fantastic players, both have won tournaments at senior level, and they were having a great match, and I felt that they were just figuring out each other's play, and okay, finish, because the points are reached within 5-6 minutes. Okay, yeah, they came back later, but then it changed the dynamic was different, because then the points were different and the whole situation is closer to the end. Everything had changed. So then they're obviously having to configure themselves to that sort of situation, and then by the time they just got over that, their match has ended again. So yeah, this system doesn't really allow players to kind of settle in. It doesn't allow them to kind of figure things out. It just becomes a lot of tense play. You miss out on a lot of potentially amazing matches. And also, like a lot of people have said, it doesn't really allow for players that are slow starters. There's been numerous of those players that might lose the opening game, like quite comfortably, but win the overall match. So yeah, I feel like those two things are quite big factors against, as far as I see it, to this new system. Another thing is, obviously, I don't know why the BWF implemented this. Obviously, I laid out a little bit of a theory earlier that maybe they might have thought about mitigating fatigue and injury for the players, because obviously they got to play the individuals the following week. So this system being shorter, a little bit easier on the body, it might allow the players to play more towards their full potential in the individual. But, having said that, I have a feeling that they've done this purely to try and create more excitement. And I wouldn't be surprised if BWF are testing this in the junior things with one eye on it being in the seniors. And to this, and also, BWF have always tried to make matches shorter. They changed the rally point scoring system to try and make matches shorter, and then obviously recently the 5 to 11 to make it even shorter still, with this kind of hope that that's going to make badminton more popular. And to me, shorter matches don't necessarily mean it's going to be more exciting, nor does it necessarily mean it's going to make badminton more popular. I think we can all sit here and name examples of sports that are incredibly popular worldwide yet go on for ages. Or sports that can go on for, a relative amount of time but finish with a draw. So this kind of incessant need that we need to make our game faster and shorter, for me, it's not necessarily a good thing. Like I've already said, badminton is a sport that I like because I love the sport, and I like the fact that there's a physical nature, there's a tactical nature. You have to be fast, but you can play it in lots of different ways. And if we just keep shortening it, I feel like we're going to lose more and more of that. And this relay system really, really did shorten a lot of that. So yeah, I don't think that necessarily making it shorter is more exciting. Again, there's a flip side. Matches that are one-sided, it means that they can be done quickly. In the World Juniors, there's loads of teams playing, and they have so many matches that being able to get through them quite quickly is definitely a plus. But I think I would rather sit that again. Let me finish this little point by looking at the final again. China versus Indonesia. I think had that been the old format, I wouldn't like to say who would win, but I think it would have been just as close, just as exciting, if not more so, had it been under that old format as opposed to this new one. I think the Chinese players might have felt a little bit more relaxed, but we would have seen some absolutely fantastic matches. And when matches are fantastic and exciting, who cares if it goes on for 5 hours, 6 hours? To me, that's... you're going to love this sport because of the action and stuff that it involves, not how quick or how short it takes to finish a match. One last thing that I'll say in this section before I kind of move on to my ideas for how we could make the relay system better or other systems that could be improved, is that still the strongest nations still came out on top. So BWF saying that this gives a chance for the lesser nations to defeat the higher nations, it just wasn't true. And to be honest, I knew that would be the case anyway, because of course you can have one strong player or two come in near the end and win a load of points, but they're not going to be that much down, they're not going to be that much better, that they can make up a difference of 20 or 30 points. I remember sitting next to my wife watching Indonesia play India, and I think it got to the last boys doubles. Don't quote me on this, but it might have been the last match or one of the last matches, and Indonesia were up by 20 points, maybe more, and my wife turns to me and says, not even Ranking Reddy and Shetty could rock up for India and win this match for them. So, there's limits to the comebacks that can be had, and I think this whole rhetoric of it's going to help weaker nations or lesser nations have a chance, it's just never going to happen. The strongest nations prevailed. That's exactly what happened. And before any of you say, USA got into top 8, they got into top 8 2 years ago under the old system. So, that there's the way that the teams fell is pretty much exactly how everyone could have predicted. Maybe you could argue under the old one, China might have had a better chance against Indonesia in the final, but that's debatable. So for me, this argument of this system helps other nations do better, it makes it closer. That's a no-go for me. Okay, so those are my main thoughts. I think it's too far removed from badminton as an individual sport. So you don't... For me, the excitement there's excitement, of course, if a match was close. But what makes badminton exciting at the core to, I think, most badminton fans isn't just quick succession of points. It's kind of like the story within it, like the individual match. It's a bit more, for me, it's more interesting to watch the comebacks, the players working their way into a match, overcoming nerves, overcoming the conditions, whatever. And that just wasn't able to be done within this new relay system. I don't think that faster is necessarily better, and also just it still produced the same result. Okay, I would agree that it was less hard on the body, so maybe it's good for this tournament where you've got to play the individuals the next week straight after. That's definitely a good thing. Obviously it was a complete team event, everyone had to play, whereas on the old format you could get away with having literally nobody into the events and you could still potentially win. There's no way you could do that under this new system. So, and everyone was involved, so obviously when you finish, everyone feels like no matter what, whether they won or lost, they contributed points to their team. So I do quite like that. But just overall, I think the old system, the old format is a bit better. Having said that, there are some things that maybe could be revised within this relay system, or maybe there's some other systems that could be used that could have the similar effect that, but are slightly better. So for me, within this relay system, maybe we could make each match a little bit longer. I think we should get rid of that 5-point minimum. That's just overcomplicated and simply not fair. You could also, if you wanted to, we could have a format where you have the old format, but instead of 3 to 21, you have 3 to 11 or 3 15. So it's shorter, so the turnaround's quicker, you get the matches done faster. But there's still within it that element of it's still closely linked to our current the individual sport, which is something I do think needs to be considered. One other one that I kind of thought of, and you can let me know this is absolutely idiotic, is that you can have the old format, but the point system could be slightly different, and you could still reduce this to have shorter games as well. But like, say you get a certain number of points for a win. You could then also add points if you've won one game. So if you manage to take it to 3, you get a point for the fact that you took it to 3. So it incentivizes still fighting on and trying to win a game, or it incentivizes winning in straight games, kind of things. And there's other elements you could. You don't want to get too complicated because then it could become more complicated in the relay system. But what I'm saying is, rather than like you win the match, you get 1 point, there's room to maybe a win gets you 2, a game gets you 1. However, I haven't thought about it in enough depth, but just something similar that it could keep a tie alive towards the end, and just make things incentivize then each game or each point still matters more. Rather than it just being the overall match. That's just something quick. I must say, as critical as I have been, I do think it's good that the BWF are looking to make changes, and whilst I have been more negative than positive, it's not to completely put down this relay system. Maybe with some revisions and some more thought behind it, it could actually become something good. I would say that I think it's something that should be left reserved for the junior events and not the senior events, and I get the feeling that's a belief held quite widely amongst the badminton community. And talking of badminton community, you guys, I think I really want to hear your thoughts on this relay system. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What's good? What's not good? What could be changed? What did you think of the points that I made? Was I talking out my ass, or did I make some sense? I know that doesn't happen too often. Are there other systems that you think could be used instead? Do you think this should just be for juniors, or do you think the Thomas Huber Cup and Cinnamon Cup could also implement something like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. It would be great to hear, great to get discussions going on it. It was still fun to watch. I still enjoyed watching the badminton. It's always good to see the next generation of talent coming through, and there's plenty of talent within that. Hopefully, we'll be seeing plenty more. I think we'll be seeing plenty more of a number of them in the years to come. So anything you want to add, then just get in the comments and let me know. Until next time, everyone. See you later.